once again. I'm Abigail Yara Asafo, Campus Director at Ashesi University from Ghana.
And I didn't also know who's fellow at Ashesi University. He's very good and soon reflecting about you introducing yourself in the chat board. We look forward to having a great time with you guys.
So today we have Ron joining us on the webinar, and for the next 45 to 50 minutes, we'll first have our moderated dialogue for around 15 minutes with Ron. Then for the remaining 30 minutes, we'll open up for Q&A, and for the fellows, if you have any question or something that you would want more clarification on, we would open that time for you to ask your questions.
Again, as we're having our session, please do well to mute your mic so that we can have a great session. Yeah, we see a lot of people have joined in. If you haven't introduced yourself in the chat board, please kindly do so. Don't forget to put your name and your country, your university, so that we can greatly know you and connect with you after the webinar session.
So to kickstart the session, we would first of all like to introduce Ron Codres to all of you. So Ron has enjoyed a 30+ year career in investing industry. He was a co-founder and CEO of AssetMark, a leading US managed accounts platform with 30+ billion of AUM, co-authored The Art of Investing, published by McGraw-Hill, and was an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. Since co-founding the Codres Foundation in 2006 with his wife, Martine, Ron has focused on impact investing and social entrepreneurship, and he currently serves on the boards of Microvest, Impact Asset, Fair Trade USA, and the Social Impact Lab at Lyon University. His work in this area has been profiled in an array of publications, including the New York Times, Barron's Fast Company, Forbes, and Fortune. We are so excited to have you all here today. It's really a pleasure to have you. And Ron, thank you so much for taking time off your busy schedules just to be here with us. You are welcome, Ron.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's great to be here. So I'm happy to start by just giving you a little perspective on kind of how I got here in front of you and how I got connected with the fellowship program. Would that make sense?
Yes, please.
Great, great. So thank you, Abigail and Sula, for the kind introduction. I'm a huge fan of Ashesi University and your founder, Patrick Awa, who's a good friend. So congratulations on being at Ashesi. And I'm also a huge fan of the Millennium Fellowship. I've known Sam Vagar, your founder, for years. And so congratulations to all of you for being part of that program. And it's great to have so many of you here. I noticed just in the introductions from so many different countries. So just by way of quick background, I've had 2 careers in my adult life. So the first one, as Abigail mentioned, I spent 30 years in the investment business, building a company that I was fortunate enough in the US with 2 partners to be able to sell. And when we sold that company, my wife Marty and I made the decision to set up a family charitable foundation. And so for the past 13 years, I've kind of moved from what had been the traditional world of investments into philanthropy and social entrepreneurship. And I have to confess, when we first got into this journey in 2006, I didn't actually know what a social entrepreneur was. I knew what an entrepreneur was, and I felt like I had been one over my lifetime. But as I became familiar with folks, and particularly young people, who were doing very innovative things to solve big problems in the world as social entrepreneurs, that really resonated with me. I felt like I was kind of hardwired to be an entrepreneur. I love to build things. And so I loved the idea that I could support social entrepreneurs in my second career and support people who are building businesses designed to solve real problems. I said one time when I was speaking in a university classroom that I spent my first career trying to build the best business in the world, and now I'd like to spend my second career trying to help people build the best businesses for the world. And so I feel like that's the journey that all of you are on here with this fellowship is learning about this field. What is social entrepreneurship? Why are people doing it? And how is it that you could end up developing your own paths in this field? So I've had the good fortune of meeting lots of social entrepreneurs, of helping to run social businesses, of seeing both successes and challenges. And I'm a firm believer that if we're going to solve the biggest problems that we have in the world, be they social or environmental or both, that we need to use innovative solutions, and we need to use solutions like entrepreneurship to come up with new ways to solve old problems. And I'm also a firm believer that it's your generation that's going to lead that, because you are thinking ahead of the curve. You're not letting obstacles stand in your way. And I'm really encouraged by all of this excitement around social entrepreneurship, which when I went to college in the 1970s just wasn't a field that was even available for me to participate in. Things like the Millennium Fellowships just didn't exist at that time. So I'm just thrilled to be addressing all of you as part of this global network.
Thank you so much, Mr. Codres, for your remarks. I'm sure a lot of people want to hear a lot about you, your journey that you had, how the challenges that you face and everything. So for the next 15 minutes, we'd like to actually have a dialogue with you and ask some questions that would be really, really helpful to the Millennium Fellows that are here listening
Please.
to you right now. So Mr. Codres, it sounds like you've been having like a successful journey, a career before you started your social impact. Sometimes there are challenges that you face from like switching from a normal corporate world into social impact. What would you say is like your main key factor that made you transition from the investing career to like social entrepreneurship and impact investing?
Yeah, so I talk about that often. I built a business with two business partners who are still lifelong friends. The business that I built continues on today. It's become very successful with people who we had hired over the years who are now involved in running it. So I had a great journey there. I loved that work. But when I got into my mid-40s, I really felt like there was something else that I was destined to do. I was really drawn to, as I traveled around some parts of the world that I'd not been to before and experienced problems and issues that I'd really not seen firsthand, I was drawn to the idea that I could and should be doing something to address those. And maybe I could play some type of unique role with my skills and experience to do that. And I had no idea that role would be social entrepreneurship. But I felt like I had to go down this journey of selling my business and having the time and resources to be able to get out and try something new. And then it was a journey of just trying to figure it out. I made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I think I learned a couple of lessons. And so maybe I'll just share one that I think is an important lesson for people that are kind of starting on this. So on my very first trip to Africa, I brought along a group of business people, and we were there to try to support a variety of different organizations. We were in Kenya, first time I'd ever been there, but we were business people that had some funds available that we wanted to donate. And so we kind of thought maybe we knew some answers, right? Because we were folks with some resources. So we ended up at this school, and we were walking through the school, and our clipboards, we were writing down all the things that we felt like the school needed. And by the end of our little tour there, we sat down with the principal, whose name was Rose, and we said, Rose, we've written down all these things. We're ready to help you. Here are the things that we want to help you with that we think you need. And what Rose said to us, I'll never forget, she said, well, we anticipated you were coming. We've given a lot of thought to what we need. Before you tell us, would you be interested in knowing what we need and knowing what our perspective is? And of course, we felt like at the time we were maybe, it shrunk us down to size, because here we come in with all of this hubris when we didn't know the answers. In fact, as it turns out, the things that she needed were very different from what we had seen, because her experience was so much more rich. She knew what she needed. So what I learned out of that was that there's two things that I think are important to do this kind of work. The first one is humility, recognizing, and I think I've learned as I've grown older, that not only don't I know all the answers, but sometimes I still struggle to figure out the right questions to ask. So humility says, if I'm going to help you solve a problem you have, it's not up to me to come up with a solution. You know the solution. It's up to me to work with you to figure out how I can give you resources to help you solve the problem. And then the second is empathy, which is a word that's used often, but I describe it as being very different than sympathy. So sympathy means I come in maybe to your country and I feel bad about the fact that you have people that are without health care or without food, etc. And I feel sorry for them. Empathy is I put myself in their place and I try to help them solve their problems, and I see them as being fully capable of doing that, just maybe with some resources that I can add. So I'm not there to save them. I'm there to really help them get a step up the ladder. But first, empathy says, I've really got to understand what their situation is so I can be of most help to them.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Codres. I mean, this has been very insightful for us. And one thing that you said that really touched me was that you encountered a lot of mistakes, but along the line, you were able to learn from those mistakes. And when you were moving on, the experiences you got from it helped you to make better decisions and choices. And you mentioned humility and empathy, and those are some of the core values of the Millennium Fellowship. And I think reflecting on this, we fellows are going to really learn a lot from you. If you are going to be able to fuse humility and empathy into our work, we'll be able to do great things. Now, moving on to our second questions. Before I ask the second question, fellows, can you please type your questions in the chat box? If there is anything that you would like to ask Mr. Codres, kindly type it in the chat box, and when we are done, we can read your questions for answers. So our next question. Many of the Millennium Fellows have had a chance to learn about budgeting through the Millennium Fellowship and creating fundraising to sustain our project. Given your experience investing in more than 50 countries, how do you identify organizations to invest in? And how do you measure the progress or success of the initiatives that you support?
Thank you, Abigail. So one of the other things besides social entrepreneurship that I've become very passionate about is something that here in the US we refer to as impact investing. And it's the idea that you can make an investment that has both a financial return and has impact, has defined impact in solving a problem. But one example, for instance, is microfinance, which we've done a lot of investing in. Small loans made to women particularly throughout the emerging economies that help those women lift themselves up the economic ladder. They pay the loans back with interest, so you achieve a financial return, and you're also having a great deal of positive impact on their lives and their families. So I spend a lot of time working with social entrepreneurs who are thinking about how do we raise money for our enterprise. And so, Abigail, you correctly pointed out the first thing is to put together a budget. And so it's great that that budgeting process has been part of the fellowship program. But the second part of it is coming up with what I call a revenue model. So if you have an organization and you're trying to attract investors, what those investors are interested in is how are you going to earn revenue in your organization? And how is it with your budget over 3 or 4 or 5 years that you'll be able to earn enough revenue to actually show a profit? Because it's only if you show a profit in your business that you have funds available to repay your investors. So what I'm particularly interested in is entrepreneurs that have thought through their business. Most businesses don't show a profit in the first year, right? You have to invest in your business, and sometimes you have a loss in the first few years, which is completely expected. But then how are you growing the business, and how much does your revenue have to grow in order for you to show a profit in the third or fourth or fifth year. And what I love about a social enterprise is if the work that you're doing is impactful, let's say microfinance, then the more of it that you do, the more impact that you'll have. So doing it successfully, profits aren't actually, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not, you have profits or impact. I believe with the right businesses, you can have both profits and impact, and the two of them work very closely together.
Mr. Codres, you spoke about sometimes you were facing challenges and some mistakes that you made. I would like to kindly go back to that point and touch a bit on it. Most of the times, as the youth, when we start our social entrepreneur journey, sometimes we face a lot of challenges such that we actually need to like change scope or like to change the environment in which we work in, or to like change the idea of what we had in mind. Like when we come to the communities, we find that the challenges are actually bigger than what we thought it would be. And that is the challenge I believe other fellows are actually going through. And most of this, you've just spoken about the budget. When you start as a fellow, or when you start as a youth when starting a project, and the resources that you have are too small, and what advice would you have to fellows in like maximizing like the little that they have, and to make sure that their social impact actually makes the impact that they want to make in the community, and that it sustains it for like a long run, like the Codres Foundation?
So just a few pieces of advice, I guess, that I've learned along the way. So one of them is that particularly when we make early stage investments in a business, we're really betting on the entrepreneur, because the business itself is very small, and it's the entrepreneur and his or her vision that we're betting on. So the mistakes that we've made have been when we've either bet on an entrepreneur that wasn't sufficiently committed to the business. When times got tough, they decided they wanted to do something else. Or in a couple of cases, we bet on teams of entrepreneurs who ended up having infighting between themselves and didn't have an alignment of the vision, and that caused the business to go different directions. So when we're investing, we're looking very closely at the entrepreneur, and we want to know how committed are they? How serious are they about this? How much have they thought through the problem? If the type of problem they're trying to solve is in another geographic region, we believe that problem can only be solved by spending a lot of time in that region and learning from the people that are affected. So we want to see that the entrepreneur has done that. And occasionally we'll see businesses where someone who lives in London or New York or San Francisco will come to us and say, I've got this great idea to solve a water problem in Uganda. I haven't spent much time in Uganda, but I think this idea is terrific, and I think it's going to work, and I think the people there will really like it when I present it to them. So I feel like that's the wrong way of doing it. The right way is someone who comes to us and says, I just spent 6 months in Uganda, and here's the big problem that surfaced when I was living there, and I interviewed 300 people to determine how they think that problem could be solved, and here's the idea that I got from them, and now I'm trying to go back to that community with some resources to implement the idea. So that to me, it's all again about humility and empathy, learning from the people who you're trying to help. And that's the same case whether it's in your own community locally or whether it's 5,000 miles away. It's really, and the other thing that I use this phrase called ready, fire, aim. And the idea is that entrepreneurs, particularly at the early stage, have to be very nimble. So in most businesses, the idea you come up with in the beginning could be very different from the way the business ultimately works out, because you learn along the way, you try things. So what ready, fire, aim is you put together an idea, you try it, you see if it works, and if it doesn't work, then you change it a bit, you try it again and again and again until you figure out what the right combination is. sometimes entrepreneurs feel like, okay, if I've raised money from an investor telling them I'm going to do X, and then it turns out that a much better solution is to do Y, many entrepreneurs feel like, no, I raised the money to do X, so I better keep doing X, even though Y is a better solution. And I can tell you as an investor that the entrepreneurs I want to work with are the ones that are able to come back to me with an honest conversation and say, I raised money to do this, but now that I started doing it, I realized that we could be more successful if we did it another way. That's the way great businesses are built, is they end up pivoting and figuring out and kind of learning as they go along. And many entrepreneurs are wary about going back. They feel like if I go back to an investor and say, my original idea wasn't as good as I thought, and now I've got a better one, that the investor will look at that negatively. I believe that most investors will look at that positively, because they'll realize you've learned along the way, and now you've come up with some better solution that you might not have had in the beginning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Codres, for the insight. As we will proceed now to ask, giving the fellows the chance to ask questions. And what I've learned from what you just said is that it's not enough to have an idea. With the idea, you need to keep trying, you need to keep figuring out before you are able to come up with concrete solutions that you can move on with. And that as an entrepreneur who is seeking to make social impact, you don't need to stop when maybe you encounter a challenge when you are trying. You need to keep trying until you come to a moment that you can say to yourself that this is actually a defining moment for me. So for the next part of the session, we would open up for fellows to ask their questions. So fellows, if you have any questions, kindly type them in the chat box, and then remember to stay muted for this portion of the call. If you pick your question, you unmute yourself and then you introduce yourself. And when you introduce yourself, we would love for you to mention your name, your university, and the country.
Thank you. I think the fellows will actually take into play what you say. Like we should be humble. We should learn from the people that we're trying to help. So we have a question. I see Montserrat Valdez has a question. Montserrat, if you are ready to ask a question, could you kindly introduce yourself, where you're from, and mostly everything.
Hi, sure. Hi, Ron. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for this. I'm Monse. I'm a senior at Harvard. And I just want to ask, what advice would you give to people that want to enter into the impact investing world and want to start a career in this field?
So, with impact investing, I think the important thing to realize about being an impact investor is that I call it involves the longest journey in the world, which is the 12 inches from your head to your heart. So the head part is all about knowing the investment world and understanding about being an investor and how that works. And of course, the heart part is understanding the impact world. And so I actually believe if you want to become an impact investor, you have to learn how to become an investor first by taking the training both in school, whether it be in business school. There's a lot of great courses even now available to folks that aren't in business school curriculums. And then ultimately working, if you want to do this professionally as a career, working inside of an investment organization to really learn how the best investment companies invest. And I think at the same time, so we hire a lot of folks now in the impact investing world, and we typically at the firms that I work with hire folks that might have 3 or 4 or 5 years experience, and they've had experience at maybe a JP Morgan or a big investment firm where they've learned the basics of how the investing world works. But then they've spent their own time. They've spent time in the developing world, or in the case of a company that I work with that does a lot of work in microfinance, they want to see people that are multilingual, multicultural. If people really care about Latin America and Africa and the communities that we're investing in, then they want to see that folks have spent, whether it's a summer or an internship or a semester, working in those communities so that they can merge together that head and heart skill set and really kind of understand, have empathy for, and really understand the people that they're trying to work for.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Code. I can also see that Sahithi Menduri has a question. Sahithi, are you ready? Are you ready to ask your question?
Yes, I am.
All right. Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. So good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for giving us a chance to talk to you and speak with you. So my name is Sahithi Maduri. I'm from UNC Charlotte in North Carolina, USA. And so this is a little bit of a specific question. So the cohort project that I'm working on is called the Life Skills Initiative. And we will be high school students and school systems across the United States with in cities that face economic mobility, that are in economic mobility crises. And so my question is, how do you go about facing a rigid system? School systems are really hard to get into, and that's been one of our really biggest challenges, is trying to get a chance to speak with those students and to work with those students, because we see that there's a need. There's evidence, hardcore facts from the Chetty report and all these different research statistics that there's a need for it. But when it comes to actually getting to know the students and what they want, we're having a hard time doing that. So have you ever faced a situation similar to this before?
So it's a great question. So let me just see if I can reframe your question so I get, so the big issue is, in order to get to the students kind of through the front door, you need to get through the whole school district bureaucracy in order to get in. Is that kind of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say even in my prior business, we were a big believer that there's the front door and then there's the side door. And so many times we found that we were trying to get into a big organization, and they were just so bureaucratic that even though we knew we had the right solution for them, we couldn't find the right people at the top to approve it. So we tried to go in and find individual people. In your case, it might be individual teachers who believe in the program and perhaps had some latitude to let you in on a one-off basis. And then in our case, what happened, there was one big investment firm that we were trying to partner with. And they just kept saying no at the top level. No, we have enough partners. We don't need another partner. We knew that we were right for them. But what it took was we started to go to individual people in the firm and convince them one at a time. And by the time we got, let's say 10, 12 of them, their views started filtering through. And it worked from kind of bottom to top. So I don't know. It's more difficult, obviously, to go to individual teachers, but if you could find an individual teacher or a school principal, even just one who believed in what you were doing and allowed you to come in and do it, and then use that as a proof point, you'll find, I think, that I've seen good things happen that way, where then one teacher talks to another, one principal talks to another, and pretty soon you have a viral message going on that kind of cuts through the bureaucracy, as opposed to, again, trying to call up the school district and say, we've got this great program, we want to figure out a way to work with you.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for asking your questions. We would like to encourage you to keep on asking your questions. This is like a great opportunity for you guys to have all your questions answered. We see Ibrahim asked a question as well. Ibrahim, if you're ready, could you come and ask your question? Introduce yourself so that everyone will know you. Yes, hi.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, we can hear you. Can you go ahead?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Codres, for the wonderful session. I'm Abdulbasis Ibrahim Olawale from Ahmadu Bello University, Nigeria. Sir, my work is on mendicant relief. We have a status quo in the northern part of this country where people poor people, yeah, if I can subject them to that, poor people tends to go for arms seeking and other misdemeanor to get their means of sustenance. However, my problem is trying to change their mindset from arms seeking into gainful employment. To however, I have a hard time changing their mindset from the archaic way of seeking for harms to them thinking of way in which they can improve themselves economically. So, sir, please, how can I make them have this mind shift, the mind change towards a positive economic thinking? Thank you very much.
So I guess in my experience, I've actually found, so I'll give you one comment. I've actually been quite impressed by the entrepreneurial nature I've found of folks, even at the bottom of the economic pyramid, even folks who, I made a joke once that I used to think that the best entrepreneurs in the world were Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos of Amazon and all those that we hear about. But I actually believe now the best entrepreneurs in the world are at the other end of the economic pyramid, the people that are actually making something out of nothing. So the types of folks that you're trying to serve. So I guess I'm wondering, so here's another of my most formative experiences was when I was in Africa for the first time, visiting a microfinance group and some women that we provided microfinance loans to. And one woman who's become a friend, her name is Florence Maduku. She lives in Buyabo, Uganda. And she said to me, we appreciate when you people from the US come to Uganda to save our children, but we need to save our own children. Thank you for investing in us so we can do that. So Florence already had that mindset, that wanting to lift herself up, not wanting to rely on poverty or charity to do it. And so here's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering whether the best solution isn't to try to change the mindset as much as it's to try to find folks that already have the mindset of wanting to lift themselves up, working with them and hoping that they will inspire others in their community to develop the mindset. Because I'm not sure that you can change it from the outside. I think people have to find it for themselves. And if they see their peers, if they see other people in their community who are able to lift themselves up, in my experience with microfinance, that inspires other people to start looking at themselves in a different way as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coates. We are still taking questions, and I would like to ask you this question. So, Mr. Coates, what resources would you say were very helpful when you were deciding to start the journey of social entrepreneurship?
So, when I started, I really knew nothing. I didn't really know what a social entrepreneur was. I could kind of figure it out by putting the two words together, right? An entrepreneur that was trying to solve social problems. But for me, it was really meeting and talking to and asking lots of questions to social entrepreneurs. So I would sit down and spend an hour with a social entrepreneur learning about what they were doing and how does it work, and asking very much the same questions that the two of you are asking me. Where have you failed? Where have you succeeded? And I found that to be very helpful because I learned so much from them that I never would have known otherwise. So that's one of the reasons why when Sam Vegar asked me to do this webinar, I was happy to do it, because I think that what you're doing in putting this webinar series together and in bringing folks to your community that can help provide advice and experience is really helpful. There's no substitute for kind of learning from others who have been on the journey for longer. So I would certainly encourage you to keep doing this because I think it's going to be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Codres, for asking, and thank you to our fellow for asking. Michael says he has a question. Michael, if you are ready to go ahead, could you kindly ask your question and so that we can all learn from?
Of course. Can you hear me though? Am I coming in clear?
Yes,
Yes,
we
please.
can hear you.
Great. So just as a brief introduction, my name is Michael Codres, and I'm a junior at Cornell University. My question to the host, I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. My question is twofold. One, how would you recommend, I guess, everyday individuals or students like myself who don't have a lot of capital to work with, how can I get involved in impact investing in a very quick time frame? And what I'm characterizing that as is maybe with a time frame of 1 to 3 months, because I'm very interested. I know it's a developing field, a developing industry, and I want to get involved, but I don't have a lot of capital to work with. So the second part of my question is, I was wondering if you could explain what is the typical investment as far as like a quantity. Like, are we looking, or I know you spoke previously about microfinancing loans, but are those the main investment vehicles that you work with respect to impact investing? Like, what other types of investments do you work, are made in the impact investing industry, and what is the typical size?
Great. Okay. Thank you, Michael. So let me get to your first question. And your first question, I think, really depends on the individual campus. There's one national organization that I'm a big proponent of, and it's called Net Impact. And Net Impact has chapters on, I believe, over 400 college campuses throughout the US, and I believe they're expanding globally. So I would suggest at Cornell, my guess is that they probably have a chapter at Cornell. And so Net Impact has been very involved in kind of helping students. And then actually they have an alumni chapter for young professionals in most major cities, helping students and young professionals get kind of an entree into impact investing. And then secondly, many universities are developing impact investing clubs that are just interested students that come together. And in some universities, they're actually allocating dollars from the student investment fund to invest, so that these clubs actually are involved with investing real dollars. Now to your second question. So impact investing, for me, it started with microfinance because our foundation was very interested and focused on providing economic opportunities to women around the world. And so microfinance was a very natural thing for us. And now we've gone even beyond that into entrepreneurship training and working capital loans for women-owned businesses that are too large for microfinance but need money to grow, and seed funding for women entrepreneurs who are looking to start businesses and need equity funding. And that's just one area, because impact investing also includes, if you're interested in climate change and that's your passion, all forms of renewable energy, natural resources, etc. So the first step is really to kind of determine what is it that you're passionate about. And it's becoming increasingly possible to take that passion and apply it to some type of impact investment. Where it gets challenging is that many of the impact investments are traditional investments that require very large minimums of 25,000 or 100,000 to participate. One that isn't, and one that I like a lot, is an organization called Kiva, KIVA.org. And so Kiva actually is a microfinance platform that allows you to go in and select an entrepreneur that you would like to support with a microfinance loan. And you can do that for as little as about $100. So I think that that's a very interesting way to kind of get started, develop a relationship with an entrepreneur, and learn about how the field works.
Next, we have a question from Dara, Tendai Dara. Tendai, are you available? Are you ready to ask your question?
Yes, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Code. So, okay, so the first one, I was saying, what advice, where do you see social entrepreneurship going? Like, what advice would you give a fellow who is starting is or a social impact area on the possible opportunities that they can explore.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so where do I see it going? So let me answer with kind of another quote that I give. I speak a lot on college campuses. And one of the things that I say to students is, I believe that the world will need 1 million new social entrepreneurs in the coming years, and that you folks are that talent pool to make it happen. But the world may not need 100 or 1 million new social enterprises, meaning there's a lot of different ways to be a social entrepreneur. And lots of times folks, if you're at a university, feel like when you graduate, the only way to become a social entrepreneur is to actually create your own venture. And that's clearly one way to do it. But in many cases, you might have more impact by joining a social enterprise. And what's great now is that some successful social enterprises have grown into very large organizations. I recently was on the board of Fair Trade USA, which does all the fair trade certification of coffee and tea and mangoes and now apparel and home goods. So we have a team of over 100 people, and we're consistently hiring folks on that team who are social entrepreneurs. They just aren't running an organization as the CEO, but they're very much involved in helping the organization grow. And then the second element, which is becoming increasingly important, is what I call social intrapreneurship. And that's where, in the world we live in today, and I think your generation is really fueling it, traditional companies and businesses are becoming much more aware of their social and environmental footprint. And they're interested in social entrepreneurship. Internally, how can they do it? Can they partner with a nonprofit? Can they develop some type of program on their own? And I think that leads to really interesting opportunities within big companies to raise your hand and say, I want to take on that project. So many of the folks we've been involved with who started working with us on college campuses, some today have their own social enterprises. Some are working in other social businesses like fair trade, and others are at places like Airbnb, for example, which now has a whole social enterprise component to it, and other businesses where the business recognizes that they need the energy of social entrepreneurs working inside the business. So I would just suggest that there's lots of different avenues to go to be a social entrepreneur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Codres. Tender, I see you have another question about technological revolution. Would you like to ask that question?
Yes. Thank you very much. So I wanted to know, there is so much technological revolution that is happening. There are new softwares being developed, hardware coming out, and I don't know if you think it's really important when it comes to this career we have chose to kind of follow in terms of social entrepreneurship. Do you think technology can play any part when it comes to social entrepreneurship?
Oh, so my simple answer, it's a great question, and my simple answer is yes, absolutely. So I think there are amazing opportunities for technology to drive social entrepreneurship. And in my career, we had a technology component to our company, but I was never kind of a technology investor. But many of the social enterprises that we invest in today are built around built around technology. And I would say the biggest technology that we're leveraging today is the incredible rise of smartphone technology adoption throughout the world. So today, we work with hundreds of microfinance organizations who 10 years ago made all their loan disbursements and collections the old-fashioned way, by sending out folks on motorbikes and, literally collecting small payments and putting them in lock boxes. Today, much of that is done off smartphones with payment technologies that exist particularly in Africa and Latin America. And in the same way, we work with thousands of artisans who connect now with markets for orders and confirmations, all on a smartphone. Same with farmers. We don't do as much work today with farmers, but we have entrepreneurs who work very closely with farmers who learn about crop prices, et cetera, by their smartphones. So I think technology is certainly, in the areas that we're working with, is driving innovation, making it more effective, less expensive to be a social entrepreneur, and allowing for much more scale, where a social entrepreneur with technology can now work with many more people than they might have been able to work with previously. And I think that's only going to continue. So I love the idea of technology and social entrepreneurship working together, because I think that there are big problems that can be solved for humanity through that combination.
Thank you, Mr. Codres. I see Sam has some clarification that he wants you to make. Sam, could you kindly come and talk so that we can have...
Hi, Ron.
Hey, there's a friendly face I know. How are you?
Hey, Ron. Hi, Ron. This is to me because it's one that you taught me. There's those 5 magic words that, I mean, you've changed my life and the way I engage in this space and in the work. And I was just hoping you could share a little bit about those 5 magic words, why they matter so much, why they matter so much for young people who are starting in their careers and maybe feel like they don't have a lot to add yet, but in fact do, and how it's manifested in your work or in the work of others, where you've actually seen it have outsized impact just by posing this simple question. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Sam. I think it was probably 6 or 7 years ago, Sam, that you sat in on the first session I did of that, and you've never let me forget that. So thank you. So we host this event in Mexico each fall, which is where we had the pleasure of meeting Sam a number of years ago. And it's all based on the idea of what we call the 5 magic words, which are, how can I help you? And the idea being that many times we kind of go around the world looking at people thinking, how can you help me? When in reality, I think that we can have much more productive opportunities if everyone we meet, the first thing we look at is, how can I help you? So I take it, let's start with this idea of you're trying to create a social enterprise to solve a problem for some group of people. Let's just say they're in an emerging economy of Latin America or Africa. As I've talked about, the entrepreneurs that we like to work with are the ones that go authentically into that community with humility and empathy, and really try to learn what the problems are and what solutions people may have tried that could actually be applied really well if they just had resources. So that's all about asking a simple question of, how can I help you? I've actually found brilliant social entrepreneurs like Mr. Vegar have applied that in a whole bunch of different ways. So I've really marveled at the way that Sam has applied it in asking for help for resources for MCN and for the Millennium Fellowships. Going to folks, instead of saying, I need your help, how can you help me? Going to folks and saying, how can I help you? And the idea being that whether it's a philanthropist or a company, or as you brilliantly did with the UN, right? Going to an organization and saying, you are trying to solve some type of problem, whether it be putting out money in charity or using your organization to help millennials, I can help you do that. So let's work through how I can help you. And inevitably, I find that when you start with those 5 magic words, saying to someone, how can I help you? The conversation comes around very naturally to then how that person can help you as well. So I often challenge university students the next one-on-one you have with your favorite professor, find an opportunity to infuse in that conversation, how can I help you? Now, first of all, it'll probably be, they may be taken aback a little bit because they probably don't have a lot of students asking that. But what you may find is you could help them on some type of a research project or something else that they're doing that could actually be super valuable for you and your career, and a recommendation you could get down the road, and something you could learn, and something you might not have even been aware of unless you'd asked the question. So at the event we do in Mexico, we challenge everyone over 5 days to use that 5-word term in every conversation. And I try to go beyond that. And every time I meet somebody, I'll kick myself if I end up having spent time with somebody and walking away and I haven't asked them the 5 magic words, because I inevitably find that doing that leads to a really interesting conversation. So thank you, sir, for bringing that one up. It's been a lot of fun to be on the webinar with everybody.
Yes, please. So this is a wrap up for all of us. Thank you so much, Mr. Codres, for taking time to share your experiences with us. Today, we've learned some magic words. How can I help you? So wherever we go to, we would keep in mind that when we ask this kind of questions, it will make the people we are interacting with think deeply and see how best we can help them. And also, we've talked about humility and empathy, that wherever we go to, when we want to do something, we need to find a way of putting ourselves in the shoes of the people and come up to solve the problem with them, and not just doing something for the people thinking that it would help them. So right now, Mr. Codres, thank you so much. If you have a final remark that you would want to share with all of us, we would be very grateful.
Also, sorry, Mr. Codres, before you begin, Montserrat was asking the name of the event that you have in Mexico.
Yeah, it's so the event is, in short, it's called the OC, but that stands for the Opportunity Collaboration. And if you go to the URL of OCimpact.com, you'll find all the information. We actually have a fellows program as well. So you could look at that. There's information there on a fellows program and applications that we have. So let me just close by saying that I think all of you are fortunate. And you're fortunate that these types of programs and opportunities to learn and study about social entrepreneurship exist on your campus, where when I went to school, it just wasn't an option. I have a feeling that if it had been an option, I'd have become a social entrepreneur before I was in my 40s. And so I love the idea that you're all looking at social entrepreneurship as a potential career now, because I do believe that we need the brightest young talent in the world focused on our most difficult problems. And it's great that you guys are all focused on that. So thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate spending the time with you.
Before you go, Mr. Codres, as fellows have a lot of questions that we need to ask and a lot of advice that we need from you. We would like to know, how can we connect with you? If you have a way we can connect with you, could you kindly share with us, maybe in the chat board, or let us know how to get in touch with you if we need further help?
Sure. How about, so I do one thing on social media, and that's LinkedIn. So please reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can chat through that format. And we can also kind of share as connections what it is that we're each looking at in the world as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Codres.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being part of this and for running it. You guys both did a very nice job of moderating. So thank you.
Yes, we had a great time. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.